And it's also called touch-me-not because it's got these seed pods that if you touch, when they're ripe, they explode. This one is being difficult.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. One thing that's neat about it is apparently it's sort of a folk remedy for poison ivy and stinging nettle because it's really succulent. Like the stems are really, really watery. Ugh. So if you think that you've walked through poison ivy, you can find some jewelweed, crush it up, and then rub it on the area, and it's supposed to neutralize the chemical in the poison ivy. And
oh, sorry, I stopped. Okay.
Daddy, look!
No money.
With the bang! Yeah, he plays forever.
Okay, touch it.
Oh. Hickories are indicative of Carolinian forests, pretty much. This is the most widespread of all the hickories, and you can kind of tell it's a bitternut hickory because you see the sulfur coloring on the buds. It's the only kind of hickory that has that sort of bud color. The Carolinian forest extends all the way up from the eastern United States and comes just into southern Ontario, pretty much stopping in and around Toronto. We're at the most northern range. You wouldn't see hickories much farther than this. And it's a really, really diverse section of forest in Canada. In fact, it only takes up 1% of the entire Canadian landmass, but it's the most diverse area in all of Canada. It's got so many different species of animal and plants that you just wouldn't find anywhere else. And hickory is just one of them. It was probably here because squirrel found a hickory tree and came and buried it thinking it was going to come back for it, and it just forgot, which is a common thing with squirrels. Where their eyes are a lot bigger than their stomachs are, so they bury a lot more than they can actually eat. And they bite the top of the red oaks, and then so it prevents them from resprouting, and then they go and bury them for later so the tannins can sort of dissipate and they'll be a little tastier. Whereas the white oaks, they're tasty right away, so they'll just nibble them and throw them back right away. But the red oaks have started to evolve to develop two different seeds in the exact same acorn, so that if the squirrel kills one of the embryos, there's still a chance for it to sprout back up. So it's a really neat way of evolution taking place. Mound. So this is a formation that's really typical of mature old-growth forests. Essentially what happens is as trees get old and die and the roots give way and rot out, they'll fall down. You can barely even see this tree anymore. It's just a bunch of rotten material. And they'll shoot up their roots, leaving behind this sort of very mineral-type soil. It's soil that's just very, very fine, and it's a mineral soil as opposed to an organic soil, which has got all kinds of decomposing matter. And the mineral soil is good for certain types of trees to germinate, like white pines and red oaks. So that it creates these little microhabitats. And typically, if this was fresh, it would just be a big pile of roots, which would be great for fungus and insects and all kinds of other little critters that could hang out inside the roots. So it's an old-growth forest that has these pit and mound formations that are just really important in creating microhabitats. Wait till these guys get down here. This is called a maidenhair fern, and it's just it's a fairly common fern in these parts, but it's just really, really unique looking. Yeah, it's a beautiful looking fern, sort of fragile looking, and it seems to be enjoying itself here. On the side, you may see something that looks a little bit like this. And that's the first-year garlic mustard rosette. Really? Yeah. So it's a biennial, which means that it lives 2 years. The first year it just exists as this little rosette. Second year it shoots up and becomes a flowering plant that produces all kinds of seeds and just shoots them everywhere. So.
Pretty close to that garlic plant.
The which plant?
The leaf looks close to the garlic or not?
The garlic mustard?
That looks close to that garlic plant that you had. The ginger?
Ginger.
Oh, ginger.
That's right. Yeah, it does. It looks very kind of similar, yeah. This one, if you find a leaf and you sort of crush it up, you can actually smell the garlic. It smells like garlic. In fact, it was apparently brought over as a pot herb while the settlers came over here so they could flavor foods and whatnot with it. And it just went out the door and didn't stop running.
Certainly in the second year when you pull it, it's got a really
a garlicky smell, yeah. So you've done some garlic mustard pulling.
Yeah, we had a bunch in our backyard.
Yeah, I'm really sick of that smell because I've pulled a lot of it. Yeah. This stuff, Herb Robert, which is everywhere, To me, it smells a little bit like cilantro.
Or carrot.
Yeah, it's got a carroty look.
Carrot, yeah.
Carrot.
Okay.
And when it's in the
Like
peak of its
green
flowering, it has this really smell. It's not that particularly pungent now, but sort of carroty cilantro smell.
Oh, not a lot right now.
It's a geranium.
It's like a
Type of geranium.
Turkey tail?
I believe it's turkey tail.
Oh, yeah. It looks like turkey tail.
Looks like the tail of a turkey, yeah.
Yes.
You can see it taking over this
turkey
log.
tail fungus? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty important looking at this big dead beech tree here, the whole cycle of decay, which is really important, getting nutrients back to the soil. All kinds of different bacteria and fungi and insects will be eating this thing, releasing the nutrients back into the soil and also releasing carbon, which a tree stores, because a tree breathes carbon dioxide, and it stores it in itself. And as it dies and gets decomposed, it releases that carbon back to the atmosphere, which is why we're trying to plant lots of trees to try and absorb as much carbon dioxide that we're pumping into the atmosphere as possible. We've come across, we're not too sure what's going on. It's right here if you come around. And if you start noticing, they're everywhere. And since we've been here in the summer, we found them dead all over the place on dead logs, just sort of sitting out in the open, which is really not characteristic of a species like this that's supposed to live underneath things.
Yeah.
So there's something that's like causing them to come out of their hiding places and just die. Beech tree, a beech nut, which is edible, although I'm not too sure. And there's a big problem with beech trees. I don't know if you guys have heard of the beech blight. Yeah.
No.
It's a scale insect, which is a really tiny little insect about the size of a pinhead. And it was introduced here from Europe. And what it does is it sort of finds a beech tree and just totally spreads on it. And it's a tiny little insect that has a huge feeding nose, and it'll puncture the bark of the beech tree and feed off of the sap, but that allows a disease, pathogen, to get in and just disfigure the tree. So that's been here for probably over 100 years now, and it's slowly making its way into Ontario and affecting our beech trees. There's a couple different blights that have happened. You've got the chestnut blight. We had our American chestnuts, which are almost entirely wiped out now. Emerald ash borer is another huge one that's just happening right now that's really threatening all the ash trees in Ontario. And we had the Asian longhorn beetle, which I think has been contained now, but that was a real big threat to our maple trees, because they just came in and decimated the maple trees in Toronto. You probably know that they had got a whole bunch of trees down.
On the airport.
So that's another example of invasive species coming in and just thriving on in an area where they don't have any natural predators.